Well, if you ever watched The Price is Right and thought, man, how cool would it be to have my own Plinko board, this build's for you. I recently had a customer reach out, ask if I could build them one of these. I had no idea how to build a Plinko board, but I said, absolutely I will. And then I started doing my research. So I'm going to walk you through the build process, the materials you'll need, how to put it all together, as well as some costly mistakes to avoid, because I made several, including running a $35 piece of plywood just right off the bat. So you definitely don't want to do that. And if you'll stick around to the end, I'm going to share with you a few things that I do differently if I had to build another one of these over again. So with that, let's get started. All right, so we're starting out with a 2 foot by 4 foot sheet of 3/4 inch plywood. And this, I bought this one already pre-cut. I cheated. I didn't want to mess with a full sheet at the time. And so we're starting with a pre-cut sheet. You do it however works best for you. But one of the first things, well, let me say this first too. I'm basing my build off of free plans available on Craig's website. I did some searching to kind of get an idea of how to do this. Came across their plans. There was no sense in reinventing the wheel. And so that's what we're going to use. I'll put a link to those free Craig plans in the description below, but we're going to be working off of that. And the first thing I need to do is lay out a grid on this sheet of plywood, which is where we'll drill our holes for all of our dowel rods. All right, we'll start out with our longer vertical lines first, and you start 1 inch off of the edge of the board on each side. All right, then from there it is 2 3/4 inch spacing all the way across. For the horizontal lines, again, 2 3/4 inch spacing, but we start 8 inches from the bottom. So we need to come up 8 inches. All right, after looking back at the plans, I don't need these last 2 lines. I just need 12 lines from, and again, starting 8 inches from the bottom. So now comes the fun part. At each of these intersections, we need to drill a 3/8 inch hole, and I'm going to use my little dowel jig here to line it up and to guide my drill bit so I can drill a good straight hole. I got a 3/8 inch drill bit on here with a collar to keep that those holes at a 1/2 inch depth. I don't want to blast through the back of my plywood, my 3/4 inch plywood, so we're going to drill 1/2 inch holes for these dowel rods to go in. So that's, we're going to kick that off. I'm going to start drilling holes. I got a bunch of them to drill, and then it'll be time to kind of sand this thing up and get a paint job on it. All right, so can anybody guess this idiot's $20 mistake that I just made with this piece of plywood right here? Yeah, I laid out my grid correctly, but each line, you only drill every other intersection, because you want one here and one here and one here, but you don't want right here, or else the little puck ain't gonna be able to bounce off anything. So it should just be every other hole, or every other intersection should get a hole and a dowel. And so I drilled a bunch of extra holes in this board, turned it into Swiss cheese, and golly, I could fill the extra holes in with the dowels and cut them off even, sand it, and by the time you paint it, I guess you wouldn't notice that, but man, that's just a lot more work. Idiot. Golly, man. What a bonehead move. Oh man, this is the fun stuff that most of the other woodworking YouTube channels don't show you, but I do, because it happens. I think I'm going to go get a new sheet of plywood. Stay tuned, guys. All right, we're back. And yeah, not $20, $35 later, we're back with another piece of plywood. This time, I already marked my lines on here, but this time I also marked the drill hole locations. So hopefully I do not screw this up. I'll pay a lot more attention. And yeah, I'll probably mess up somewhere else, but we're gonna try to get these holes right anyway and go from there. So, take two. All right, now it's time to hit this thing with the sander, probably with some 120, and sand all these little edges down on these holes, and hopefully start getting some dowel rods in here. All right, now I flipped this thing over, and I'm gonna make some marks for pocket holes that we're gonna drill on each side and along the bottom that will eventually be used to attach the rails on the bottom and the sides. And I marked my board bottom and top just so I can stay oriented and try not to mess up another sheet of plywood. All right, so we're just gonna run down through here and hit our marks. Then it's over to the miter saw to cut my 3/8 inch hardwood dowel rods into 2.5 inch long pieces. And you're gonna need 3 of these 4-foot rods to get the 54 pieces you need for the Plinko board. And there is very little waste, so don't mess one up. All right, next up, we're gonna start putting these in some holes. Glue in there. One down, 53 to go, or however many it is. Last one. Let's see if we can not mess this up. All right, well now you're seeing the junky other side of my shop. That should do the job. All right, next up is time to make my sideboards and my bottom board, and I'm actually going to deviate from the plan at this point because the plans call for 4-foot sideboards that are the same length as the plywood, the board itself. So this thing would actually just sit on the ground and be 4 foot tall. I want it to be a little more substantial than that, so I'm going to cut those sideboards at 5 foot. We're going to turn those into legs, front legs. Cut a little bit, probably a 15-degree angle at the bottom, so it's got a little lean to it. And then, of course, we'll have back legs or kind of kickstands on it to hold it up. But these need to be 5.5, so 1 by 6s. I don't have 1 by 6s. I could go buy them, but I have some of these 1 by 8s, long 1 by 8s, old ones that I got out of my basement. They were used for shelving. I'm going to rip them down to 1 by 6s. And we're going to use those because I got them, so why not? We'll have to do a little cleaning up, a little sanding, but that's okay. They'll be fine. We're going to paint these blue. And so, yeah, we'll head over here to the miter saw, get these cut, 5-foot lengths for the legs, and then I guess it'll be 2 foot across the bottom to span the gap between the 2 legs. And we'll go from there. All right, back over here to the miter saw where we're going to cut 15-degree bevels on these to give the game board that lean, that 15-degree lean. And we don't really want to take anything off the length overall, just taper it to 15 degrees. All right, well, unfortunately we're back to the not so fun part of sanding, but that's just part of it. I could have run them through the planer, but honestly, we'll just knock them down with sanding. This is more relatable to those of you who may have minimum tools. Unfortunately, I didn't account for that first coat of paint raising the grain on my plywood, so I ended up having to knock the rough grain back down with some 220 sandpaper before putting on a few final coats of paint. Then it was time to cut the dividers that sit at the bottom of the Plinko board and separate the 5 scoring areas. These 6 pieces are 2 1/8 inch wide by 4 3/4 inch long with a 45-degree bevel at one end. All right, guys, I got all the final paint on the legs and on the board, so we should be good to go. We're going to start some assembly here, and we're going to start by attaching the board to these 2 main legs. And this is going to end up being a back leg, but for now I went ahead and ripped it at 2 3/8 inches because that is the distance this board needs to set from the front of the leg. It's actually going to be 2 3/8 from the front and the back. That'll center the 3/4 inch board perfectly on this 5 1/2 inch board. So I'm going to take this board that I already ripped to 2 3/8, line it up and clamp it, and that'll help me drill those, or not drill, but to actually screw in those pocket hole screws that you'll see here in just a second. And I don't want to crank down on this. I don't want to mar my paint, but just enough to hold this in place. All right, facing the front, lined up. Yes, this is correct. All right, this is the bottom board that will go fit in here like so, hopefully. But I'll get that in there in a minute. I made these notches and I didn't record that yesterday, but I made the notches so I could get this painted. But these, and you'll see when I put it all together, but the notches will face the back, and those are actually going to allow the back legs, which will be like a kickstand, to fold in, and they'll set down in these notches so it'll all be flush when you fold this thing up. And again, you'll see how that all plays out once I get it done. But all right, so I had to trim off the sides just a little bit here and then hit it with some paint. That's all dry. That's been a few hours. All right, let's see if we can sit this thing down now. All right, one thing I think I'm gonna do, it doesn't call for it, but I think I'm gonna put a screw in each side right here, because the only thing holding this bottom on right now is the pocket hole screws and the glue holding it to this. There's nothing attaching these sides to the bottom. So I think I'm gonna shoot a screw in on each side here just to give it a little extra support on the front and just to tie it all together. All right, now we are ready for our, oh, that don't go there, for our centerpieces here. these are going to get glued and nailed from the bottom, and I don't call for it, but I'm probably going to hit them from the back with a nail too, just to keep them. I just feel better about it, securing them. Even though the plans didn't call for it, I decided to shoot a single 1 1/4 inch screw into the back of each of those dividers to keep those from moving or breaking free in the future. All right, we got 2 3/8 inch spacing on the back of our board, but I'm gonna cut these legs down to 2 1/4 just to give us a little wiggle room there when we go to mount these in, so they'll have room to pivot and everything. I'd rather have a little extra space there than push it too close. So. All right, the next thing we're gonna need to do is round over one end here. It's gonna be the pivot end where these attach to the top of the Plinko board, so they don't hit. And then we hit both ends of the legs with the sander to smooth them out and make sure they were nice and rounded over. Then I drilled a 5/16 inch hole, perfectly centered at the top, 1/8 of an inch from both sides and the top for attaching them to the Plinko board. Next, we drill our holes in the sides of our board to attach the rear legs. And I figured out the placement for these just simply by positioning the legs next to the board, getting everything at the angle that I wanted, and then marking the hole locations. I meant to get the little wing nuts for these, which I will, but for now I'll just put a regular one on there. Make sure the holes are 1 1/8 inch from the back edge of those sides, so the legs will set flush with the back when you fold them in. All right, so I cut this board at about 22.5 inches, which is the 24 inch distance here minus 2 3/4 inch boards, because this is going to sandwich right in like so, except we'll put it down in here just to supply some support for these legs. Tighten it down too much. So next up, I added a piece of light chain to the board with a 1/2 inch number 8 screw. I opened up the legs to get everything at the correct angle. Then I cut the chain to just the right length and attached the other end to the legs using that same type of screw. Then it was time to put on the initial coat of clear coat. I then added the vinyl Plinko decal that I cut with my little Cricut vinyl cutter, and then hit the board with a few more coats of clear before calling that part done. All right, guys, we're getting down to the wire here on this thing, thank goodness. And so one of the next things will be to get this plexiglass piece in place. And unfortunately, it looks like it's going to take a little trimming on the side too, but first thing it's going to need is across the top here. So I cut the 24 inch wide piece of plexiglass using a cheap cutting tool that I picked up at Home Depot, but I cut that at 4 3/4 inches tall to match the height of those scoring dividers. I also had to trim off about 1/4 inch from the side, so the plexiglass would drop down between the sideboards of the Plinko board and mount directly to those dividers. There we go. With the plexiglass in place, I drilled pilot holes, one at the top and the bottom of each divider. Then I attached a piece of plexiglass to those dividers with small white panhead screws that I'd picked up at Home Depot. Now I got to get some vinyl, more vinyl, to do the numbers. We're going to number these. I think we're going to put 5 in the middle, 1's right here, and then 3s on the outside to kind of replicate how the game show has it laid out with the biggest prize in the middle. And on the game show on The Price is Right, there's zeros next to the $10,000 winner. Of course, they got a lot more slots to fill too, but all right, to make our pucks, I'm using a 3-inch hole saw bit, and it turns into these perfect, well, what are these? About 2 3/4 inch pucks. And this is one, of course, that I already cut and threw some paint on. But I want to make 5 or 6 of these just for them to have on hand, because you know how kids are, they'll be slinging them around and they'll be lost in no time. But I will say this, using this 3-inch hole saw, you better be holding on to the saw, and you better make sure the wood that you're cutting is clamped down, because this will sling a piece of wood, or it will sling a saw if you're not paying attention, you're not careful. Just take the cut easy and let that whole saw do the work and bore through that wood. And then, of course, I got a piece of scrap wood underneath here so I don't drill into the top of my workbench here. All right, puck number 2. I can't remember if I said this or not, but this is just some old 3/4 inch pine that I had. I tried a cedar fence picket, which is 5/8 inch, and of course cedar's lighter, and I didn't like the way it felt. These heavier ones they just sound more substantial. They bounce around on those pegs good, and it seems to be kind of the perfect compromise or balance. So yeah, we'll get these sanded. We'll shoot some paint on them. We're going to shoot some clear on them. I am looking forward to wrapping this joker up and handing it off to the buyer, which are some friends of ours for a school prom and future events. So yeah, looking forward to having this one done so I can move on to something else. Big money, big money. Yeah, 3, not bad. But guys, that wraps up our build portion. But as promised, I did want to go over a few things that I would do differently if I had to build another one of these. And the main thing is I would not have put these dowel rods in as early as I did in the process. That was a bonehead move. And then I was left to sand and work around these things for the entire project. So if I had to do it from scratch, I would drill my holes. Then I would paint this board with a roller rather than spray paint. I think you get better coverage that way. Do your sanding, put your clear coat on, then put your dowel pins in there. I think that would just save a lot of headache. Honestly, I wouldn't even have painted the dowel pins if I had it to do over again. I'd probably just have sanded and clear coated those and left them their natural color. I think that would have been a nice contrast to the white background. But that's just a styling issue. You could paint them any color you wanted to, for that matter. The other thing is, I guess, I cut these front legs at a 15-degree angle, which is what seemed to be the recommendation from stuff I could find online. But I didn't like it. This thing was still turned up a little steep, and sometimes those pucks will get to fluttering or even occasionally fall off the board. So what I ended up doing was adjusted my kickstand here in the back. I lengthened the chain a bit to where this thing is now leaning back probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 degrees or 22, somewhere in that ballpark. And that seems to be the sweet spot to where the puck stays nice and flat against the board. He still slides good, bounces around, and gets down into the scoring little holes there without flying off the board. So that's just what I found. If you're going to build one of these, you may want to test it before you permanently kind of affix your kickstand and figure out where that sweet spot is for you. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Overall, I'm happy with how it turned out. Had a lot of little painful lessons in this one, but in the end it turned out well, and I think the kids are going to enjoy it. Hopefully they won't destroy it too quickly. But another one in the books, another client bill, which is always good. And yeah, it's on to the next one, guys. And as always, I will see you on the next video.